Welcome to our first episode of Bridge to Wellness. My name is Bridget Guilla, your host. I'm thrilled to introduce you to a very special guest and a friend, Ekras Gorakh.
Namaste, Bridget.
Namaste, namaste. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Tell us about you and first of all, your background.
Sure. I run a software company. It's an artificial intelligence startup. I used to be an executive at a software services company. That's my day job. I'm a husband and a father of two kids, and I'm also a yoga and meditation teacher. And I have my own deep practice over 2 decades, and I've been teaching yoga and meditation in the local community. And of late, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how to bring our ancient wisdom into the modern lifestyle. Why? Because we're all leading really shallow lives. and there's a lot that's available to us so that we may live deeply. But all of that wisdom is not available in a language or format that people can digest into their everyday lives. It's usually in, I come from a Hindu tradition, so it's usually in Sanskrit or older Hindi, and it's addressed typically to people who have deep practice in yoga, in the school of yoga itself. Yoga, not just posture yoga, but also deep meditation and devotion. And because this is written in a language that many of us don't have access to, people have not had a chance to understand all that wisdom that's available to us and incorporate it into our lifestyle, which is the reason why modern society is rather unhappy. For all the wealth that we have, we seem to be unhappy with ourselves, unhappy with the way we are working, and unhappy with our place in the universe, filled with fear and filled with the wrong sort of emotional drivers. There is an antidote to that. It's always been available through all deep, long-standing cultures. They have figured out how to live deeply, and my objective lately has been to think and talk and write about the subject of living deeply. How do we live deeply in this world without having to let go of this world, without having to let go of our responsibilities and accountabilities, or even our drive to succeed in this world? Without any of that, letting go, how do we still live deeply in this world?
I know. Be happy. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show today, is because taking your classes for so many years, you've always appeared to be happy and very humorous.
Sure.
And I always really appreciated that.
In Sanskrit, in the yoga tradition, in Sanskrit there's a word swastha. What that means is to be able to be fully and deeply engaged with the self. And when you're at home in your own body, in your own self, then you're at home in this world. But if you're not at home in yourself, then nowhere in this world will you find your home. And so that's what that's been my practice.
And how would you even begin?
How would you begin? That's a long topic.
We have a whole hour.
There are three things that that I like to think about. One is, are we deeply engaged in our work, in what we do, in the things that we do? For example, this conversation that we're having, are we deeply engaged in it? So in our work, are we getting the satisfaction and joy that we want? The second is, are we deeply engaged with ourselves? Or have we got to know ourselves really well? Have we got to know the source of our energy, the source of ourself? And the third is, how deeply are we engaged with our place in this universe? It's a universe that's been around for, 13.62 billion years. It'll be around for another 4 or 5 billion years, give or take a few. So it's an infinitely deep and broad universe, and huge in terms of time as well. And so here we are with our, little tiny bodies, and we live only for a few years. We feel small in this universe. We feel overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And the real reason we feel overwhelmed is we feel that we are different, other than the universe. So we feel that we're not a part of this thing, and we must somehow protect ourselves from everything there is. But there's a lot of everything, and a lot less of ourselves. So most people live their lives thinking, I must make myself bigger through more name, more fame, more money, or living longer for whatever reason. All of these are just ways to extend the self, to fight and essentially overcome this infinitely large universe in space and time. But it's not going to happen. And so most people are fearful, unhappy, and filled with dread for the inevitable loss. And so the three things is how you began, which is, how do you find satisfaction in work? How do you get to know yourself? And how do you get beyond your sense of the self and be one with everything that's out there and in here?
So going back to that topic where we actually feel disconnected. And when we actually realize we are not disconnected, we feel more at peace.
You feel more at home.
That's what I experience anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like this little snail that carries its home on its back. You're always at home wherever you are.
Yeah.
And so that's really it. As long as you're at home, at your work, in your body, in this universe, you're always at home. It doesn't matter where you are, under what context you are. You're always where you need to be. It doesn't take practice. It doesn't take work.
Right. Go back to the snail. Tell me a story.
The slimy little snail?
Tell me
I
a
don't
story.
think
I want to know. I love your stories.
The point of the snail analogy is very simple. We feel that we must belong somewhere, and we spend our lives looking for wherever we belong, our people, our place, at what point do we feel that we have arrived at where we need to be? And that travel takes us far and wide. And inevitably, you either come back home to yourself or you get lost out in this big bad world because you haven't found yourself. And it turns out, invariably, the finding is really the finding of the self, finding of your own inner self, right? And that's like the snail, which is carrying around a little home all the time. Can get inside it whenever it feels like and go out wherever it wants. It's always at home. Nowhere else to go. But it's still out and about. That's the fun part. It's not as if you're at peace, then you have nothing to do. In fact, you can engage with work more meaningfully because you're now at peace. You can engage with everybody else much more intimately and much more warmly because you're at peace.
I understand that. I get there.
Sure.
I get there from time to time. When I'm feeling very compassionate about a situation, I feel like I'm tireless.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. What's the source of our energy? Is it the food we eat? Is it the thoughts we think? What is it? In fact, I began my series of notes with this word itself, enthusiasm. And like you said, you're tireless when you're enthusiastic. But the word enthusiasm itself actually comes from tu, or God. To be filled with God, literally, is the word enthusiasm. And whether you believe in God or not is not the point, but to be filled with a universal spirit of energy is to be enthusiastic. And that enthusiasm is what comes out as passion to other people.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Once there was a boy who did the same thing again and again. One day, he was told he had autism. He got help and slowly learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
Shall we talk about breath work?
Sure. So, Bridget, the surest sign someone is not alive is that they're not breathing. The most proper way to live is to have a deep, intimate, and personal connection with your own breath. But most people are barely aware of their breath. The fact that they're breathing is incidental to how they carry their lives. And so most people live shallow lives.
Yeah.
The breath is a bridge between the conscious experience and the unconscious mind and body. And so being able to communicate to our inner selves requires this connection with the breath. And becoming familiar with the breath is extremely important to regulating and understanding your own situation, whether it's understanding your mood or whether it's communicating with your heart or your digestive system and so on. Language everywhere. All languages have words for breath that are synonymous with to live. The word ruh means breath. The word spirit means breath. The word prana means breath. And these words also, these are from different languages, these words also mean life. So breath is life, quite obviously. But being able to live more deeply requires us to be able to breathe more meaningfully.
I noticed there are times when I start thinking, and the moment I think, I start retaining my breath.
Mm-hmm.
I notice that from time to time.
Yeah.
Awareness kicks in and I take a deep breath and move on.
Yeah. In English, we say when someone dies, we say they have expired, which means they have breathed their last. Expired, they've just breathed out their last breath, and that's it, no more.
Right.
When someone's in Yosemite and looking down at the grand, beautiful valley, they hold their breath in as they are inspired by what they see. When two people are plotting against the government, they conspire because they're bringing their heads together and they're commingling their breath.
Yeah.
And so that's breath as well. Everything is breath. And all of these words are not just, it's not just a coincidence that these words mean what they do, and the fact that they relate back directly to the breath. When you gasp in with surprise, you're gasping in, and that's you're holding in the breath. And when danger's gone, you sigh a sigh of relief. Every breath is a dance between this taking in of energy and this exhalation of relief and relaxation. And every breath we go through this cycle, not just from our nose or our mouth, but the entire body is breathing. The entire system is breathing. All pores of our skin are breathing at the same time as we breathe in and out. Yeah. And it's not just inside. When we sing, we are transmitting not just our breath, our sound, but also the breath, and we're actually telecasting our heart rate. If you know how to pay attention, you can actually hear the pulsating heartbeat of somebody. And archers have the same thing, where if you're an archer, you need to be able to learn to time your archery with your breath. All of these are important. All cultures that emphasize excellence know the breath.
Yeah.
And
Singing.
that's why singing is the same way.
So wonderful. I used to take singing lessons. Don't ask me to sing. Didn't work. But I would feel so happy driving home after my singing lessons. I would have the most wonderful feeling. I feel like I had a dose of oxygen.
Yeah.
And I was feeling blissful too. And there was a lady on my way here today. I was walking, carrying my bags, and this lady was singing so beautifully. And I was just smiling because it even felt good to even listen to her. And then when she drifted off in the distance, I started singing too. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound too good. I'll keep it low. But yeah, singing is so wonderful.
Singing, humming, whistling, these are all ways to exhale slowly. These are also ways to engage the heart chakra. And so that's why we do these things, and they bring us joy.
Could you give an example of a good exercise for our viewers?
Depends on what they want.
Let's ask. Could you explain Kapalabhati?
when we breathe, it's not just simply that we're breathing in. Most people think that they're breathing into the chest, which is literally true, but also not quite true, because a lot of different parts of the body are participating in that process of breathing. So when we start breathing, we breathe in and out through the nose for the most part, for most of us. And the reason you must breathe in from the nose is what happens not just in the nostrils, but right above the mouth. So when we breathe in from the nose, and if you do this right now, you'll experience that the breath going in through the nostril is cool and dry, but only till the top of the nose.
Yeah.
Right above the mouth, there's the sinuses. And over the sinuses, there's an interchange of moisture and heat that's happening, which means that by the time the breath hits the back of the throat, feel it? It's no longer dry and cool. It's become warmer. That's why when we have a cold, sometimes you need to cover your nose, because you need to warm your breath artificially through the blood in the fingers. Because the breath needs to be warm by the time it goes into the lungs, because that's how the oxygen exchange would take place. But then we're not done yet. At the back of the throat, the breath then travels down, but it doesn't quite just travel down. Working with the chest is the belly, and moving the belly is a set of muscles that are aligned at the top of the belly, below the lungs, and all the way at the base of the spine. And all these muscles are coordinating their efforts when we breathe, every breath. So the belly, the chest, the shoulders have all got to be participating in every breath, as does the nostrils and the sinuses and the breathing tube that goes up and down. So all of these are very closely coordinating their efforts. And this is happening for the most part without our conscious brain driving the experience, which means that we're breathing on its own, right? The body is breathing on its own for the most part. But you can consciously alter your breath. And a lot of the yogic breathing practices are to consciously alter the breath in a way to either reset the pattern of breath or move the energy in a particular way, one way or another. And so all the breathing practices, either preliminary cleansing practices, Kapalbhati is one of them, or pranayama itself, which is pranayama is the extension of or regulation of breath. All of these are ways to sort of to work on the breathing system itself. You ask about Kapalbhati, right?
Yes.
Kapalbhati, literally, Kapal means the skull, Bhati means to shine, and so literally this might mean skull shining. And Kapalbhati is a way to bring more energy and liveliness into the face and the forehead and the head. And the way, what we're doing in Kapalbhati is we're only using diaphragmatic breathing. We're not using our chest. So there are three parts to the breath, like I said earlier. So if I sit up, you could see that as I'm breathing, my belly will move, my belly hand will move. So usually when you breathe in, the belly fills out, so it swells out. Then the chest fills in. And then the shoulder pulls back a little. And then we start to exhale. Now this is somewhat exaggerated. At the end of the exhale, you have to pull your belly in, push the breath out, then just let the belly go. So notice my chest hand didn't move, just the belly hand. Now the chest hand, now the shoulders, and then let go. Now this is yogic breathing, where it's three-part, belly, chest, and shoulders. When we're doing Kapalbhati, we're only doing belly breath. And the way we're doing the belly breath, we're filling our chest, our lungs with about 3/4 of capacity, not all the way through that we can't breathe in or out anymore, just about 3/4, and then only exhaling. It's useful to imagine that there's a vertical shaft running down the top of the head all the way down to the base of the spine, and you're essentially pressing the breath going up and coming out of the top of the head.
Oh.
So it's like
Okay. Like a whale?
spouting out, yeah, like a whale spouting, exactly. So that's what you're doing. So
Okay.
and you're doing this to a count of 1, 2, 1, 2. It's super slow. If you're doing it too fast, you'll run out of breath. And you'll know this as soon as you stop your Kapalbhati. You should not feel the need to breathe again for the next few seconds. And then, you're doing it at the right pace. But with every pranayam, we always recommend that you learn from an expert directly. And the reason for that is the same reason I said at the beginning of this piece, which is the breath is our conduit to our unconscious, subconscious self. And you want to make sure you're sending the right signals. If you do the wrong kind of practices, so some people read from books or watch YouTube and practice on their own, and they let their practice carry them into uncharted terrain. And what happens with that is you might just signal to the unconscious mind something that you didn't intend to, and you might have adverse consequences of that. So it's always better to learn directly from someone who's done this before and who's been to the edge and come back.
Yeah.
Not fallen off the edge into crazy land.
Like disorientation or shorter breath or
Lots of stuff. I
So
wouldn't get
many.
into that here, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of things. And this is not to freak people out. Breathing is completely natural. I highly recommend everyone breathes. And the thing with the breath practices, Kapalbhati is relatively okay, but a lot of the breath practices, if you read from a book or just watch YouTube and do it on your own, you could be doing them wrong, which is one, but you could also be overdoing them, or you could be doing them in a pattern which is sending the wrong signals through the body. And because it's below the surface of our conscious experience, we don't have access to it. So it's like you're signaling to people on the other side of, the bridge, and they're thinking please send nukes, and that's probably not the signal you're sending. Please send help is what you want to say, and they're hearing, hey, please send nukes. They're like, okay, my friend, have it your way. Here's the nukes. So the thing is to be careful, is all.
We'll be right back after these messages.
I'm Ferdinand. You look at me and think big. You think scary. But I'm a little misunderstood. Sorry, I almost killed you. Kids with learning and attention issues are misunderstood too. Take the time to understand. Learn more at understood.org.
Let me tell you about the toughest guy on earth. He does the work of 2 jobs, but only gets paid for one. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Could you explain the intercostal muscles in between the ribs? We rarely ever expand the ribs, right?
Full yogic breathing is, the way I teach it in my sittings is to, we're not trying to breathe faster or slower. We're just pinching and extending the ends of the breath. So imagine your breath normally traverses this distance, right? Now all you're doing is you're pinching and extending the ends of the breath. The middle of the breath remains the same. We're not trying to be faster or slower or harder or weaker, none of that. It's the same breath in the middle, but we're just pinching and extending the ends a little. And later you might slow it down even more, but that's later. Once you understand that you're merely pinching and extending the breath, all that means is the chest part of the breath remains the same. All you're doing is now if you're inhaling normally, this is your normal inhale. So everything rises and falls, rises and falls. This is the normal breath. Now, all we're doing is at the end of the exhale. So when I exhale, everything comes back, right? This is the breath. So when I exhale, everything comes back. I'm trying to now pinch and extend the exhale by pressing the belly in. Now, I'm only using the rib muscles to pull the belly in gently, and then I let go. But because the belly has been pulled in, naturally the breath rushes into imagine 3 balloons, a balloon in the belly, a balloon in the chest, and a balloon in the shoulders. So the belly balloon is expanding out first. And then when it's filled out, then the breath naturally fills out the breath balloon. And then at the end of the inhale, the shoulders pull back just a little, and then you can begin to exhale normally. And then repeat the cycle again. And this is very gentle. We're not trying to force, we're not trying to hyperventilate or hypoventilate. We're not trying to make the breath uneven. We're only making the breath a little more even, a little more rhythmic, and a little more extended in both directions. And so by extending the exhale, by pulling in the belly, and then extending the inhale by pulling out the shoulders, and that becomes the full breath. And then later you can slow it down. There's more techniques beyond that. Why you do this is another question that you might ask. Why should you engage in this breath? What's wrong with the breath that I have? I'm perfectly fine with my breath. Thank you very much. It turns out that usually when we breathe without paying attention to the breath, we're usually mimicking our thoughts. And our thoughts are usually racing one behind the other. And because of that, the breath is shallow. And because the thoughts are shallow, the breath is shallow as well. So we're just sipping breath in and out, very shallow. Through yogic breathing, we're just somewhat artificially, but as in somewhat more consciously, extending and expanding the breath. In turn, allowing our thoughts to also find a little more room to think a little deeper thought, a little slower thinking, and a little more deeper engagement with the quality of every breath, as well as the quality of every thought. So why yogic breathing?
Yeah.
It allows us to actually to slow down our thoughts. It allows us to actually reset our body, and it allows us to engage ourselves more fully. So ground ourselves more fully into this body, all of which are good things.
Ground ourselves and just say empty the thoughts. How would you?
The thoughts empty themselves. If you try to empty the thoughts, it's like, chasing
Turkeys.
cats or turkeys or whatever, just, because you're chasing after them, and then,
Right.
and in the chasing, that becomes a sport in itself. Hey, you thought I don't want you, and that thought I don't want. And then it just becomes, you're reinforcing anything you're paying attention to. So we're not interested in our thoughts. The thoughts empty themselves. We're just interested in our breath at this point, and that's all we do. And the entire body system is communicating with each other. So for example, if I ask you to stop your heart right this moment, you can't do that. If I ask you to stop digestion for maybe a couple of minutes, you can't really do that. If I ask you to stop sweating for 3 seconds, you can't do that. You just can't control the running of the body because that's not open to any shutdown, right? It just works on its own. These systems are being regulated through a part of our body-mind that we do not have direct access to. But through our breath, we have access to it. Every breath, we're alternating between rising panic and waves of relief. Every time we breathe in, we're somewhat directing our attention in one direction, and every time we breathe out, we're relaxing because the danger's gone, right? And so there are parts of the system that are listening for these cues. We can't talk to our heart rate, but our heart rate does pay attention to how our breath is. And like our shallow breath makes us pump harder, or it makes us sweat more when we're stressed out. So if we deepen our breath, we're able to now send signals to our body that all is well, the systems are running fine, and now we can work at optimum speed. So the autonomous nervous system works in 2 primary modes, and I'm going to caricature this a little. there's more nuance to it, but the two modes are sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, which are, you might, again, heavy degree of caricature here. They're fight or flight or rest and digest systems. What that means is they're either interested, the fight or flight is when you're out in the savannah and there's a lion chasing you, and you're not interested in digestion, you're not interested in your reproduction at this particular moment, you're not interested in anything other than running the heck away from the lion that's chasing you. So your heart is pumping hard, your blood is being sent to the extremities, the arms and the legs, and digestion and reproduction are not quite things that the body is interested in. So high stress response.
Isn't that amazing? No need for coffee.
No need for coffee, just have a lion chase
Green
you
tea?
every morning. Yeah. Just a lion in the morning is good enough. You get 3 cups of coffee. And the reverse of that is the classic Thanksgiving meal, which is you've had so much food that you now want to rest and digest. You're now this boa constrictor that's just lying around. It's just consumed, I don't know, maybe a deer or something. So it's just going to sit there for a few months. Please don't move me. I'm just going to sit on this meal, and the blood is rushing to the belly, and you don't want to move. You just want to stay there. And those are two competing systems that are always at work, like maybe the accelerator and the brakes in your car. And usually one or the other is pressed. And usually in our modern life, usually it's the one that's fight or flight that's being pressed. So our digestion becomes weaker, our reproductive sort of prowess becomes weaker, again, because the body is not interested in those. It's high stress, because we're always being chased by the lion, whether it's coming to us in the savannah or whether it's coming to us in the form of an email or something on Twitter or something somebody said that needs a response right now. And so we're high strung. And because we're high strung all the time, the body's natural response to all this stress is just as if there was a lion chasing us in the savannah, which is, let me beat the heart faster, more pulse rate, more sweat, all the good stuff that comes with it. And how do you undo all that? You could take medicine to thin your blood. You could take medicine to slow down the heart rate. You could take medicine to do all that. But you could also just talk to your body and say, look, it's all good. There's not a lion chasing me right now. And how do I tell you that? I tell you that by easing my breath. So I tell my heart that it's all good, my friend, because I'm just easing my breath now. And so this should be a signal to you that it's all good. And now you may ease up on the lion chasing heart rate and just get into a normal heart rate. And that allows us to now lower the stress levels in the body. And it allows us to now be more at peace. It allows us to pull our snail shell back on and come back home, because we're no longer being chased by a lion.
Yeah, it sounds like to be more at peace, we can be more non-reactive.
We can also be better reactive, because we're just responding to things as they come, action, reaction, like you're saying. But we can choose that response. This is that famous Viktor Frankl quote, right? Or misquote, I'm never sure, because I did my research and it turned out he didn't quite say it. Somebody paraphrased him, but but between an action and your response to it, there is an opportunity to pick your response, right? And that's once we're able to become a little more at home, at peace with our breath and our body and our place, then we can pick the right response. We don't have to do it habitually. We don't have to have our buttons being pressed continuously, right? And then we can pick which buttons we want to respond to because they're urgent, and which buttons are just trick-or-treaters out on Halloween. Yeah. And we don't need to respond to them because we don't want their tricks and we don't want their treats.
Or Mom, 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 mom.
Mom, mom. Are we there yet? Yeah. Yeah, so these buttons are baked in, and because we're already stressed out, we're used to being stressed out. In fact, part of the angst that we have is we don't have enough stress, so we find places that stress should be coming from, and we invent complete problems that we must respond to. All of this is happening below the covers of our conscious experience, so we don't have access to it. But through the breath, we can talk to it. And that's why we must talk about the breath.
Yes. All day and all night, we're breathing. Any other suggestions? As soon as you wake up in the morning, or what would you suggest for our viewers?
My own personal practice is...
Give us some homework.
Homework. You get a neti pot out of the stores these days, and over here as well. But a neti pot is to rinse the nostrils with salt water. Now, you don't want to use water itself because it has a different pH from blood. And if you use regular water, you might just burn your nostrils. So use salt water. And you get neti pots in drugstores these days using lukewarm water and salt. And then if you rinse your nostrils, then it allows the nostrils to be open. And so as a child growing up, I had clogged nostrils all my life as a young child. But for the last, 15 years, I've not had to use any medicine. Very rarely do I have to use medicine to open my nostrils. And I attribute that completely to the neti practice. And so now it's all habitual. As soon as I get up, it takes me less than a minute to rinse my nostrils. And it's like brushing, you have to do it. And then there are purificatory practices in breathing, which is not quite pranayam, but preliminary, that I highly recommend. It takes about between 5 to 7 minutes to do every morning. And once you do it, you sort of reset your system. It's like a reboot on your phone or your computer. You sort of reset it. It's now back to factory condition. It's all good. And then the breathing is comfortable for the rest of the day.
I probably do that every morning and usually in the evening before I go to bed.
Neti pot I wouldn't recommend in the evening before going to the bed because at least an hour before, because there's salt water left in the nostrils, and when you sleep, lie down, there's
oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. So the salt water runs to the back of the throat, and there's post-nasal drip. You don't want that. It's not good. So,
oh, thank you.
So if you do come back and do it in the evening, do it at least more than an hour before you lie down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good suggestion. Yeah. We'll be right back after these messages.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Anxiety.
Yes, what about anxiety?
Still connected to the breath. When we take shorter breaths, the heart starts to palpitate. So it's compensating, correct?
Our internal systems are somewhat listening to each other for cues. And they're paying attention to each other. And because they're paying attention to each other, they can influence each other. But the negative of that is if we're breathing shallow, the heart infers that I must pump harder. And listening to the pulsating heartbeat and the shallow breath, the mind begins to think there must be some danger, which is why my body is viscerally responding to it, and I must pay attention. And now my ears are perked up and I'm looking out for danger, cues to danger. And because there's no lion chasing me right now, there's no imminent danger as we're sitting here, my thoughts now start listing the kinds of things that might be giving me trouble. And then one or two or many of those then become, in quotes, the source of this danger. So now we have the sense that there is danger because our heart is beating harder. And then we look for the source of a danger. We find the source of a danger in some kind of dangerous thought, some unlikely event that is likely to happen in our thoughts. That's going to happen. And then we start thinking about it. And that thought then gives us anxiety, and then it gives us a reason to be anxious about. Mm-hmm. And now you have full-blown anxiety, all of which is caused by some miscue between 3 or 4 or 5 different parties. So somebody said the wrong things, and everyone's out in a tizzy, and that's anxiety. And many times we realize when the danger's gone, that the seeming cause of that anxiety was overblown. Sure, there's maybe 1 in a million chance of something untoward happening, for example, but we've overblown it to a point where it seems almost an imminent occurrence, right? Instead of a 1 in a million chance, which is the statistical odds of something, we feel that it's 100%, it's all already happened, we just don't know it, and I know my body feels it. You see what's going on?
Yes.
So that leads to anxiety, and many times you look back at that time and you think, well, that was nothing. There was nothing that was causing me to be anxious except my anxiety itself. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, you can break this cycle of anxiety by simply paying attention to the breath. And in the highly likely event that the 1 in a million calamity is not happening right now, then you're at peace, as you should be. And when the 1 in a million calamity does occur, you're probably still better off paying attention to your breath, because you can respond to the dangers more appropriately when you're in control of your mind and not just panicking here and there. Mm-hmm. And so in both circumstances, you're better off paying attention to your breath, danger or otherwise. So anxiety can be resolved. And this is my feeling. The thoughts themselves are not the causes of anxiety. Our anxiety is the cause of those thoughts. And the way to solve it is not by addressing those thoughts themselves, which may work for some people, but most of the times the thought itself is not the problem. It's that we have an anxious anxiety of some sort at the background because of our shallow breath and our sort of deeply, pulsating heart that we attribute to a thought, and then we let the cycle take over. So many times just paying attention to the breath is a good way to reset all the anxieties.
And paying attention to how we react. Mm-hmm.
Comes naturally. Once you're stationed well inside yourself, you can now pay attention to how you respond to things. And you can pick a response. It doesn't always have to be the red button. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can press the blue button.
Or I will not respond.
Yeah, or not respond. Yeah, not respond. It's a great strategy for most problems.
Yes.
Just ignore them. If they're still there, yeah, maybe.
I had plenty of practice when the children were young, driving in the car and they might be crying in the back. I can be completely non-reactive and keep driving and just let them cry. And my daughter said once, "Mom, how does that not bother you?" Like, "What, honey?" And I just keep driving and
You could be the voice of sanity in that group and actually prevent the group from escalating into, high-pitched, screaming matches or panic. It's the same with groups as well, right? Everyone's paying attention to each other, and people can work themselves into a lather. But one sane voice, someone who's paying attention to their breath, could easily say, "Look, it's all good." And a lot of this is subconscious signaling. With yogis, it's often said that you can sense that they've entered a room before they've entered a room, because there is a calming effect that precedes their presence. That's because we're always sending out energy signals, and we're always picking up energy signals. And because much of this is below the surface of our experience, we might notice that something here says it's all right. And so with deep yogis, you can sense, people can sense that their presence has sort of entered the vicinity, and that makes a difference.
Yeah.
One person can make a difference.
You can sense that they're actually breathing.
Yeah, you can sense other people's breathing, but also their energy system. You can sense who's amped up and who's not. And you can sense that without being in proximity. This could be, some distance away or outside the room, and you'll still sense it. Our bodies are like tuning forks. We can sense it, but modern life, we've stopped paying attention to all this stuff, so we don't know anything about it. Sounds like superstitious mumbo jumbo, because it seems like, hey, I don't experience anything, but you can if you try.
I'm going to tap into something. Let's see if I can explain this right. When people say, "I can sense somebody's energy, I can tell they're under a lot of stress," my approach is a little different. When I sense somebody is under distress or uncomfortable, it sort of tells me that I need to change my energy. I need to soften my eyes. I need to lighten up my shoulders a little bit. And I take steps forward so that they can feel comfortable. I take full responsibility for even the energy around me. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And again, we're resonating beings, right? We have neurons that sense each other's emotional states, mirror neurons. So we're empathetic social creatures. So every time we engage, I'm looking at your mental state as I'm looking at you, and your mental state I experience in my own self. It's not just a third-party thing. I experience it in myself. So with two people interacting, you can sense, like you said, the other person's mental state, and they can in turn sense yours. So in this state of resonance, you can change your state because you're aware of your state. You can change your state. It'll cause the other person to change their state as well, because we're listening for cues from each other.
Yes.
Below the radar. So this is not superstitious. All languages have these cues built into them. We know this in colloquial language. We just don't think these are possible in the world today because we don't believe what we don't see with our eyes. But what we experience with our heart, we should believe. And much of our language, singing, all of them speak of the heart, right? And all of them are about the energy that is exchanged between two people, many people, just all populations at large.
I've heard of the energy vampires and whatnot. I don't take that on.
So we used to have a former colleague, very senior colleague, and our joke used to be, that this guy is like those Harry Potter Dementors. You know the black crazy things that come in and they suck your energy out. So this person would move into a room and completely suck the energy out of the room. Just zoop, it's just all gone. Everyone's else just dead and frozen, zombie-like. And so yeah, some people are like that. You can suck the energy out of a room. But then they're the opposite, right? The life of the party. They walk into a room and everyone lights up because it's their energy which brings a glow to everybody else's faces.
When somebody walks into the room and they bring life to a party, they're radiating something. They're radiating good, and nothing can penetrate. So those are the leaders.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. There's a lot of work on leadership presence, which talks about this, which is about being fully embodied in our own body and using our presence in our own body to influence others. It turns out that everyone's reading cues all the time. It's not what I say. It's not just the language. It's how I say it. It's not just how I say it. It's how I embody it. So if I'm just sitting like this with droopy shoulders and I'm telling you to buck up and it'll all be great, you're thinking, my ears hear it'll be great, but my eyes see that, my friend, you're anticipating the worst. You understand, right? So as a leader, being able to carry ourselves, in fact, that's another reason why executives and leaders should learn how to listen to their breath, because everybody else is already listening to their breath, through how they're embodying themselves and presenting themselves. They're telegraphing or they're radiating or tweeting, in today's language, their internal state through how they carry themselves and how they breathe. And that happens. So a synchronicity develops between, the leader of a group and the group itself, where if I'm breathing deep and shallow, other people will start eventually mimicking. So in sales, there's the mirroring is a big part of sales training as well. When you're in a sales meeting, you realize most people, when they talk to each other, because we're empathetic social creatures, we will pick each other's language cues or accents, or even body language cues. And whoever leads, other person might follow. It's a game. And a leader can influence more people. And so being in the body is a really important thing for leaders to learn. And leadership presence requires how they carry their voice, and how you carry your voice depends on how you carry your breathing. So breathing, it comes back to being able to connect with the breath at all times.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you.